Section 3.3.RA-2, a sample of college students was asked how much they spent monthly on delivered Thai food. We want to approximate the mean for the cost. So here's the monthly Thai food costs and the number of students. We have 5 classes going from 10 to $19.99, 20 to $29.99, all the way down to $50, $59.99. And then here's the frequency of that particular cost. Now, the sample mean is given by the formula, where you have the sample mean, which is equal to the sum of the midpoints times the frequency over the sum of the frequency, where x represents the midpoint or the value of that particular class. Fi, or F1, 2, 3, and so on, is the frequency of the class, and n is the number of classes. Now, in number 2, what we want to do is we need to first determine the class midpoint of each class. The class midpoint is found by adding consecutive lower class limits and dividing the result by 2. So, before we do that, we also need to make note that we need to include a last class, and that would end up being 60.00, and then that would go to 69.99. Which means we don't have a frequency for that. We know that we have 0, but we need to make sure that we look at the last lower limit. So what we're going to do is we need to find the midpoint. So we're going to take the lower class limit, 20 and then 10, divided by 2 to get 15. And then we're going to take 30 and add 20 and then divide that by 2 to get the next midpoint. And then we're going to take 40 and add that to 30 and divide by 2 to get 35. Then we're going to take 50 and add 40 and divide that by 2 to get 45. And then, as I stated earlier, you want to get the last lower limit of the last class, which is 60 plus 50 divided by 2, which gives you 55. So therefore, we've determined the midpoints of each class. So here it is located in our table. We have a midpoint between 10 and $19.99, which is going to be 15. This is going to be 25, 35, 45, and then 55. Those are the midpoints for each one of those. Next, we want to compute the sum of the frequencies. So the sum of the frequencies that we have up here, we're going to have to add 6 plus 17 plus 29 plus 15 plus 6. So when we add that together, that gives us 73 because that's part of the formula. And now, part 4, we want to multiply the class midpoint by the frequency to obtain XF for each class. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 15, which is the midpoint, and multiply it by the frequency. So 15 times 6 gives you 90. And then the next midpoint, which is 25, we're going to multiply it by the next frequency, which is 17. So 25 times 17 gives you 425. The next midpoint is 35, and then we're going to multiply that by the next frequency, which is 29, to give us 1015. The next midpoint is 45. We're going to multiply it by the next frequency, which is 15. 45 times 15 gives us 675. And then the last midpoint, which is 55, we're going to multiply it by the last frequency, which is 6, to get 330. Now in step 5, we're going to compute now the sum of all of these. So we're going to take 90 plus 425 plus 1015 plus 675 plus 330 is going to give us a total of 2,535. And now what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the sum of the frequencies and the sum of what we just found into our formula to find the mean. So the sample mean is going to equal what we got for the sum, which we got here, which was 2,535. And we're going to divide that by the sum of the frequencies, which we got to be 73. And we end up getting $34.73. So therefore, the sample mean is $34.73. So again, what we need to do in this scenario is the first thing is is we need to find the midpoints of each class. Once we find the midpoints of each class, we also need to find the sum of the frequencies. And then when we get the midpoints of each class, we're going to multiply it by each frequency to get those results. And once we find the sum of those, then we can plug that into our formula to find the sample mean.